Hi.
Good morning, everybody. Delighted that you can make it. It's beginning our July series. We're into the 8th UCD summer COVID series. So delighted to see familiar people coming back, and happy that we're continuing to, I suppose, provide clinical services and manage in Ireland, you know, in terms of COVID mortality and morbidity. Many of you are familiar with the format. It's a talk given by an international guest speaker. Today's talk is going to be about half an hour duration. And just like we did last week, for those of you that attended, we're going to open it up at the end to some interactive component. So do keep your mics on mute for the beginning, but at the end, at the opportunity for questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and if I notice your name and you haven't been brought in, I'll give you a cue to come in. But otherwise, we'll see. You might be able to manage it yourself without much moderation by me. I'm delighted to host this series with my colleague, Dr. Bláthnaid Gavin, and delighted that Paul Harkin comes every Friday, and the amount of psychiatry that we are getting into the inside of UCD is fantastic. It's also been co-hosted by the College of Psychiatry of Ireland. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. I know Michael for longer than I know my daughter. I met Lara. I think your phone is not muted, and we can hear your lovely children, which is delightful.
Sorry. Thanks, sorry.
No problem. So I met Michael when I was working in Columbia in New York. He is a clinical psychologist and was already very well known to me in terms of work he was doing in ADHD, but also work in the area of CBT. And we continued a strong relationship, in part, Michael, probably because you have Irish roots. And I don't know if you're going to say that, but my dad's from Mayo, and my father and Michael's father were probably neighbours, we discovered after a while. So we certainly found a few Irish haunts in New York to frequent together. But Michael is assistant professor in Columbia. He's involved in clinical work in CBT, in training and teaching, and also in research. And Michael is no stranger to academia in Dublin, because he's come over and taught on our UCD Masters in CBT, and was one of our external contributors to it. And always people enjoyed your talks, Michael. So I'm delighted that you're talking today about the area of COVID and anxiety. Thanks a million. Apologies for getting you up so early.
Yeah. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. If there was any doubt how much I love Fiona, my willingness to get up at 7 a.m. And to put on a dress shirt, as if I've been wearing dress shirts, should be proof. Anyway, thank you all for your interest too. Let me just change this. I'm distracted by all your faces. Anyway, thank you, all of you, for your interest. I'm touched that people care so much about New York City. It has been a very desperate time for the city that I very, very much love. You know, a couple of things set New York City aside, don't they, right? We in New York City have the vitality and busyness. We're accustomed to a certain pace of life. I'm used to seeing 1,000 people a day, whether I want to or not. And this virus and the need for social distancing has changed the city on us. I continue to see patients, albeit by video chat. The group of patients I see, 3% of them, 4% of them are still inside New York City. What's happened, sorry, I'm just changing views so as to, here we go. What's happened to New York City is that a great majority of the people have moved out. Among the well-heeled crowd, we've all left for houses or rentals that are outside of it. When you drive through New York City, even now, it's a ghost town. You can tell who's been back in the city for the last few months and who hasn't. Those of us who've had cause to go in periodically can see now how it's warming, how it's opening, how things have become a bit better. My colleagues who left to a second home in March and are only first coming back now are shocked by how quiet it is. The compliance with social distancing and masks and such is really very, very good. The people are to be commended with how well they've been doing with it all. And there's a couple of stories to tell that I wanted to tell today. I guess one's a little bit of what it is like to be in the city. But the story, I'm not sure how much that I have any great expertise on the experience of being in the city. I thought I would say more about the psychiatry, what it's been like to run a psychiatry or psychology practice during all of this, and what our experiences with patients may have said to us about psychology and how it is that we're all put together as patients. So that was my plan for what to talk about today. A couple things are true. One is that of the communities affected in New York City, you really need to break them into separate subgroups. This hasn't been the same pandemic for everybody. Part of the challenge that you have is you have individuals who have lost loved ones, and I have people connected to me who have had that experience. You've had individuals whose lives have been turned upside down because they have been caring on the front lines for people. And then you have the rest of us. And I put myself squarely in the category of the rest of us. Let us start at the beginning. The people who've lost loved ones. We've had the unfortunate opportunity to speak to people who've lost a spouse or a parent. It's a terrible thing. If we ever had any doubt of the importance of all of the cultural ritual around death and dying, the importance of that is magnified and made ever more obvious to people that lose someone during this. A friend of mine lost his wife. She passed away in the same house they were both living in. And you know, she's gone without funeral, and she's gone without kind of community gathering, you know. And I went to his house to meet with him afterwards, to say something, to stand 10 feet away, but to try to stand beside him. It was so bizarre to stand there in Tim's backyard, outdoors being better than indoors, and to stand 10 foot away, social distancing. You know, when everything tells you that when a friend is in that sort of spot, you go and you hug him or stand beside him. And he's gone through several months now trying to adapt to the most extraordinary change of his life. Having lost the wife of 30 odd years. And he's done that without any of the ordinary stuff. He's had to create new rituals around all of that. And that's the story of one set of people, the story who've lost someone closely. I had the occasion to speak the other evening with a emergency room physician who is at NYU. NYU, New York University, was certainly, and all the hospitals were extraordinarily busy, perhaps NYU especially so. And the largest feeling he was left with was not so much loss, but anger. He was furious with the hospital and the way the hospital had treated the staff. He's new to medicine. He's a resident, so he's a couple years out of medical school. And he was shocked at the state of affairs, and shocked at how, in his opinion, how little the administration of the hospital cared for him. It's colored his feelings about hospitals. I don't think it's changed his feeling in any way about patient care, but he certainly sees himself as a man stuck between two warring factions. The hospital and its desire here to be a business, and the need for patient care, which he found very much at odds. He also found the hospital to be insufficiently interested in the well-being of the frontline care providers. Not just that they were willing to send them in sometimes without appropriate protection, but also that they weren't especially concerned about the hours they worked, the level of risk they incurred. The medical students don't get the same coverage and sort of disability death benefits that the physicians employed, full physicians employed at the hospital do. And his attempts to gain those sorts of accommodations for his fellow residents were rebuffed by management. And he found that really an abandonment from the people that he was working for. So So there's one set of stories that's about personal loss. There's another set of stories about the trauma of going from, I mean, emergency room physicians are accustomed to people passing away during their shift. They simply weren't accustomed to this many people passing away. They weren't accustomed to people passing away where they had scant little that they could do for them medically. And they weren't so used to people passing away on their own. And those three effects probably tell us something about psychology, right? We as people can take bad news, but it's better when it's not so much. And it's better when you have some sense of control. At least I'm doing this. And it's better when you're not a sort of frontline watcher of someone passing away on their own. So group one is I've lost somebody. Group two is, boy, my life has changed because I'd had to stand on the front lines taking care of people. And then group three, the group I certainly saw so much more of, was I am responsibly socially distancing and staying at home, and I've abandoned all of my usual social contacts to do all of this. Those were the patients we saw most and the patients that we took care of. And I thought I'd make most of my comments about them. So, a couple of interesting things happened. The nice thing about psychiatry, or at least the historic thing about psychiatry, is a sense of difference from the patient, right? That part of what I bring to the conversation when I sit with a very upset person is that I'm somewhat removed from it all. You're here telling me about this terrible thing that's happening to you. And what's different now is that you're here telling me some terrible thing that's happening to us. It's really rare to be in the same boat as a patient, and as they complain about their lot in life, that you're in it with them. I've been around New York City long enough that I had a similar experience in post 9/11. It is a very different feeling to be with them. You sort of lose objectivity and distance. The other thing psychotherapy requires of the practitioner is a reserve for a sort of empathy at all. You're bringing a bit of your psychic energy and lending it to this other person who's not in a good spot. And one's own sort of psychic energy is so depleted during all of this, because you're wrestling with it all as well. I'm sure many of the restrictions you went through in Ireland are similar. In March, it became fairly clear fairly quickly that we should switch from in-person meetings to video meetings. We're a fairly large center. We're 10 docs and a bunch of other extraordinarily important support staff. And for lots of reasons, including the health of some of the people on staff, we switched to video. I was convinced that video treatment of patients was going to be a terrible idea. I'd done a little bit of video in the past. I run an anxiety treatment center. We treat lots of shy kids, and when they go off for college, they often continue to see us, albeit remotely. So we've had that experience with remote treatment. My worries were not well-founded. Our experience with video treatment has turned out much better than I anticipated. And across the board better than I had anticipated. I thought a few things would happen. I thought a lot of people would drop out immediately because they were used to receiving one product, the benefit of being in the room with somebody who cares about them, and that they wouldn't be willing to trade that in for a different product, someone who cares about them through a computer laptop screen. And I was wrong, and the great majority of people stayed. Within our center, there's different docs, and we assign them different types of patients. They're all anxious, as I mentioned. We see an awful lot of what you think of, sort of talkative teenage girl who's anxious. And we send them all to the one person in my place who loves talkative, anxious teenage girls. And we see a lot of kids who are on the spectrum as well. As you know, there's very, very high rates of anxiety in spectrum disordered youth. And there's 2 or 3 of us in the center that see a lot of those sorts of kids. And the next brilliant idea I had that I was completely wrong about is I thought, well, okay, patients haven't quit, but what they're going to do is they're going to quit disproportional to diagnostic group. And the chatty teenage girls will do great with this. They're very familiar with the medium of being on video and phone chats, and it won't feel that ordinary, out of the ordinary to them. But these younger boys with Asperger's, those boys are going to quit on us because, you know, it's so hard to hold those kids' attention when you're in the room with them. Never mind trying to hold their attention when you're, you know, this distance from them. And boy, I'm happy to tell you, I was wrong again. The mildly autistic boys like it. Maybe it's the amount of time they spend with screens. Maybe they're not that great with social interactions, and this pares down and makes simple a social interaction. Again, I was extraordinarily pleased. The third bet I made that I was wrong on, as you can tell, I'm wrong on a lot of these bets. The third bet I made is, you know what will happen now is that that we'll have a steady and increased rate of attrition. That because this treatment is less engaging, you know, you're not with me, that people will leave treatment quicker. And our retention rate of clients has never been better. Virtually everybody we were seeing in March is still seeing us now. Myself and my colleagues are so struck by this because many of these patients we're seeing weekly. And the thing that's obvious in seeing them weekly is they don't have much new to tell you. Especially in the early days, the people had gotten into their little bubble, the 3 or 4 people they were quarantined with, maybe fewer. And in between week to week in the phone call, extraordinarily little had happened. They may not have gone out of the house or only gone out to go grocery shopping. They hadn't seen anybody. I was amazed that people wanted visits because I didn't know that they had enough sort of new material to go through. But not only did they want them, they wanted them and stayed and participated in treatment at a level of retention that we've never had before. It's really been pretty amazing that way. And then the other things start to become clear too. You know, you're talking to someone who's at home and they're against this backdrop of COVID. And the thing I was most struck by is what they wanted to talk about, right? What they want to talk about is, you know, 80% set by them and only 20% set by us. We're kind of pushy in that way, in that we drive some of the topics of conversation. And the thing I was most struck by is that people are who they are, even in the course of a pandemic. The OCD guy with the extraordinary doubts still wants to talk to me about his doubts. And, you know, the woman who's upset about her neighbor and how the neighbor has never been kind or good to her still wants to talk about her neighbor. The presenting problem remained the same. And one of the things that became clear to me out of that is that we're really treating sort of character types more than we're treating people who are upset about life circumstances. When I talk to people outside of psychiatry, the joke they almost inevitably make is something about, you know, oh, an anxiety center, you must be extraordinarily busy. But that joke is predicated on the idea that people come to us because they're stressed by ordinary everyday life routines. In addition to our great rate of retention, the other thing that's been remarkable during COVID is the absolute absence of new referrals. Our phone is not ringing. New people aren't seeking us out. I'm sure that the general anxiety temperature of New York City is higher than it was before. But it's something other than bad life stress that drives people to treatment. We had an involvement in the post 9/11 New York City set up psychiatry care facilities for those individuals who had been traumatized by the events of 9/11. And I had an involvement in these centers. What you came to quickly realize when you worked at those centers and met those people is that most of the people you met had psychiatric conditions that were significant and long predated 9/11. That 9/11 was a small chapter in a longer book that they had about their own mental health, and that they were taking advantage isn't quite the right turn of phrase, I guess. But they were making use of the psychiatric care now made available inexpensively to them to take care of things that were always true already. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't seem that bad events are great drivers of psychiatric need, as much as it is that some people have psychiatric needs and more so than others, and that bad events only multiply, exacerbate pre-existing conditions. Of the people that we were seeing throughout the whole process, the the other thing that we always believed was true, and I've come to believe to be even more true, is that one manages their emotions through a series of habits that they have in their daily lives. And some of us have a bounty of good and flexible habits, and some of us have a dearth of habits or ones that are inflexible. You see, what social distancing first stole from people is it often stole from them something they were relying upon to feel okay. The husband that didn't like his wife, so he stayed at work till midnight, working every night. There's two solutions in that. Hopefully all that extra work is good for his career and his income. But it was also the way that he mitigated the amount of time that he spent in a bad relationship. We were treating a teenage boy, divorced parents, and a mother that was an extraordinarily difficult person to spend time with, a mother with an Axis 2 diagnosis. The way this boy managed his home life was to not be part of it. And he went to school during the day, and he signed up to nearly every extracurricular that he could. And he spent time at his friends' homes, and he smoked a more than average amount of pot. And that was his emotions management strategy. Involvement, distance, marijuana. When COVID began and he was obligated to stay indoors with his family, his 3 emotions management skills went out the window with him, because you don't get distraction, distance, and marijuana when you're sitting in the same apartment with your parents. And his well-being plummeted, and the amount of arguing he had with his family went through the roof. Our inclination, though, isn't to see that as a new onset thing. Our inclination is to see that as the crutch, if you will, that he typically relied upon was taken away from him. And that's been our proposal through all of this, that we all have things that we rely upon, sort of tent poles for our well-being. And relying upon those tent poles makes a very, very big difference for us. I thought I'd go through a few of them. One of them is just familiarity. Familiarity does an awful lot of good for you, right? This is the first talk that I've given by Zoom. I've given lots of talks in person. I would be so much happier and find this so much easier if I was just in the room with everybody. The lack of familiarity here makes this tougher. Familiarity gives you a lovely been there, done that sort of feeling. And my routine now has that again, because we're enough months into this. My routine before COVID certainly had that, because maybe I'm a very boring fellow, but I wound up doing so much of the same stuff every day. I more or less left my apartment at the same time and more or less commuted through the city the same way, etc. And there's very little new to process. The researchers on attention point out to us that one of the reasons that you're more exhausted when you visit a new city is that you're overwhelmed by the newness of it all, and you're overwhelmed by all the cognitive calculations that you have to do in a new place, as opposed to the lack of all those calculations when you are in a familiar place. And familiarity is one of the first things that went out the window to people. And again, the importance psychologically of the loss of familiarity is that what a nicer thing to be able to say to yourself than been there, done that. Been there, done that. I know I can do this. I know how this story turns out. This is something I can handle. Familiarity is the experience that those sorts of very encouraging coping statements are based upon. And the version of me that walks down the street saying some version of I can do this, I know how this is going to turn out, that version of me makes out okay in the day, because saying that to myself and all of a sudden you throw one new thing on my plate, I think, yeah, sure, well, one thing's no great addition to my lot in life. But when everything feels unfamiliar and everything feels a challenge, and suddenly grocery shopping is fraught, and do I have to, wipe vegetables with some bleachy substance before they can come into my home? When all of that becomes true and you try to add one more bit of familiarity, I'm already too stretched thin by it all. So familiarity is the first thing that most of our patients lost. The other thing that they lost that turns out to be terribly important is social support. We're a big fan of saying that social support is probably the greatest Prozac that there is. That if I had to pick a single greatest contributor to mine and our emotional well-being, it's probably social support. Now, social support comes in different sizes, though, all of which add to the total, however. In my pre-COVID life, there were probably 20 people a day that at some level were meaningless to me, but were small conversations. In New York City, we have doormen, you know, lots of the guy who holds the door and you have a 2-minute conversation with them about the local sports team. In a way, these people, they're in no way your inner circle of friends. But all of those small quotidian bits of interaction with people are each in their way a small bolster to your mood, right? The secretary at the front desk that you say hello to, the person you meet at the water cooler who doesn't quite count as friend, but certainly counts as friendly face. All of those friendly faces went away. The other thing that went away in terms of socializing is that whatever socializing you were doing was at a distance. And while we were initially all kind of a little entertained and amazed at how interesting it was to have a Zoom party and we were all sitting with our, you know, cup of tea in our own homes, the thing you couldn't get away from is the incredible loneliness of having such a smaller life. Of the people I have taken care of during this time, people are in different spots. I talked to one woman, she's living alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. And I talked to someone else, and he and another family are camped together in a larger house out in the countryside. It might not surprise you that these people are having a very different outcome from all of this. The woman living alone has a level of anxiety and fear that's very hard to tamp down, because having her own thoughts for company and already having the inclination to worry, her only company really is a voice in the back of her head saying something threat-filled about COVID and how it might all be. And the nice thing about when I become anxious about all this is I have the benefit of a 10-year-old son who's desperate for me to play GoBots and video games and other such things. So there's only so much time I can be anxious. Between the family that surround me and the work that demands my time and attention, I'm fortunate enough to get distracted away from all of this. This poor woman on her own doesn't have the benefits of socializing or attention. She's really become terrified about leaving her house. It's certainly safe enough now to leave one's house in New York. You can follow precautions, you know, wear a mask, pick a less busy time, don't go indoors, etc. But even under these things, she's found it so hard to do. Months into it, the greatest uplift in her mood was when I finally convinced her to go to a social event, be in the room with people that she knew and were familiar with her. Her goddaughter was graduating college, albeit remotely, and she was able to go to she was able to go be with them and watch the remote ceremony together on a screen. But it's the biggest social thing that she did. And it really changed her life. Like, it really made such a difference for her. Part of the cute intervention we've dreamt up for her, by the way, is that we've created a bingo board. Just to, right, bingo translates to our own thing. Bingo's not an American only thing. Good, thank you. And in each of the boxes, rather than the random numbers and letters, we wrote activities. Meet a friend, eat at an outdoor restaurant, walk through Prospect Park, walk over Brooklyn Bridge. These are landmarks and community places near her home. And of course, her goal, her task, is to fill this up. That lack of socializing has really sunk her. The other thing that's true about socializing, of course, is that socializing works its magic in a couple of ways. The first of which is distraction, right? I'm upset about something, I call Fiona, and we talk about something completely unrelated to what I'm upset about. But we have the fun of each other's company. And the level of engagement that conversation requires gets me out of my own head. And in that way, I'm made less upset because the constant inner dialogue of, oh crap, this is going to go poorly, has been interrupted by the presence of another who's engaged me. That's half of how socializing works, I believe. But you see, that half of how socializing works is diminished during COVID, because every damn person I call talks to me about nothing but COVID. And every conversation leads to COVID. You say to your friend, boy, those are nice sneakers. And they say, yeah, I bought 2 pairs. I was going to return the other pair, but I can't because the store is closed because of COVID. And you think, all right, fine. Boy, this is a lovely chicken dinner. Thank you. It was so hard to shop for because, you know, the supermarkets now are difficult because of COVID. And you're like, my God. And part of the advice we gave families during this is, for heaven's sakes, we have to find a way to socialize, and we have to find topics that won't inspire COVID as a conversation. And we came up with various versions of this. The version that we picked and got a lot of mileage out of is your favorite song when you were 10 years old. What was your favorite song when you were 10? The nice thing about that topic is a couple of things. Number one, your favorite song when you were 10 is probably not some big sad dirge, unless you were a really odd 10-year-old. Like most of us as 10-year-olds really like kind of sugary pop music, right? Mine was the big dance hit of the day. So by picking my favorite song when I was 10, you know, we kind of go around the table, all of us sitting there. What the conversation becomes is, first of all, my 10-year-old song has no connection to COVID whatsoever. It's Get Down Tonight by KC and the Sunshine Band, in case anyone else here has the same musical taste. It's hard to turn that into a sad conversation. It's really hard to turn that into a COVID conversation. And of course, since I'm sitting at a multi-generational table, the other thing it begs is you got to play the stupid song, right? Because the 20-year-old sitting at the table has no idea what it is, and the 10-year-old sitting at the table has no idea what it is. And what I've crafted is an evening where my socializing is based on something else. And one of the big bits of social advice that we gave people is, for heaven's sakes, please, please, please socialize a lot. And please figure out a way to socialize around topics other than COVID. That was our big thing. The other advice we gave to people, socializing's other great superpower, is this, that the quality of social support is proportional to the sort of intimacy of the thing that you share. If you and I talk every day, but all I ever say to you is, nice weather, I think I'll go out later, boy, our president is no good. I mean, those things are all true, I guess, but they're rather superficial things. And when I engage you socially around topics that are superficial, your topics coming back, and in conjunction with that, your support for me is similarly superficial. The one thing that this pandemic allows us to do is to speak to each other in a deeper and more meaningful way. And in initiating conversations with you that are deeper and more meaningful. You know, this COVID has made me consider my own mortality and whether I've spent my time well. And I'm so glad I've made these choices in my life, and so disappointed that I haven't accomplished these things in my life. And those greater, deeper, more important conversations, when they're what's coming out of me, invite more of that of what's coming back to me. And amongst many of the shy people that we meet, they're starving for emotional contact. They're the creator of their own starving because they do two things. They just reach out too infrequently, right? They don't cast enough bait out, so to speak, for people to get. And then when they do engage people in social conversations, they're so concerned about impressions management, right? Do I look good to you? If I say, boy, you know, this COVID thing really, you know, I was in a bad frame of mind Tuesday night. I got so worried about this. I, the shy person, don't say revealing things like that. I'm disinclined to acknowledge what, to me, I think of as weakness, because I worry that you're going to judge me for those weaknesses. So what I tend to do is I tend to skate along, talking to fewer people and talking to people about more superficial topics. But in engaging people in superficial ways, the quality of support coming back to you is similarly superficial. It's only in telling you who I most truly am that your affirmation of me can most truly move me. If the only thing you know about me is that I live in a place and I wear a blue shirt, and you say, hey, he seems like a nice guy, what are you actually endorsing? But if what you know about me is good and bad, warts and all, and you still like me, boy, that endorsement means so much more to me. And bad times create some opportunities. And one of the opportunities a bad time creates is the opportunity to talk to people around something substantial and to talk to people in ways that reflect and speak to our shared humanity. And part of our shared humanity is that we're all creatures with fragility and needs. And that fragility and need has been made more obvious by difficult circumstances. But surely when I confess to you my fragility and need, what I find out to be most true is our similarity. If I had spent this time talking to you this evening and just told you about my darker moments, my more upset times during all of this, my worries for my health and the health of my child, my financial worries, etc. If I had spent this half hour doing that, it would be a terrible talk, admittedly. But I wouldn't say anything that you wouldn't already know or wouldn't have felt yourself. My experience when I'm most honest and forthcoming with people is that people say some version of me too, been there. I've had the same experience. And in that level of connection and affirmation around things substantial, the who I am is sort of ratified and supported at a more substantial level. And those were our advice so far to people in COVID, is let's all please take a moment to identify all of the social support structures that you had been relying upon previously, and let's try to recreate them now. The things you were relying upon previously were familiarity. For heaven's sake, let's make a new familiarity. I'm really disappointed too that your old familiarity is unavailable to you, and maybe unavailable to you for some amount of time. I'm very, very sorry about that. Let's please create a new familiarity within your home, whatever that is. And I created routines in my home where every morning I did this for the first 10 minutes and this for the second 20 minutes, and this is the third thing to do. The what exactly I filled those boxes with turns out to be pretty immaterial from a psychology point of view. The fact that those boxes and that predictability exists is important. I would wake up, put on the kettle, spend 10 minutes sort of bleachifying my house. And then I would sit and play a board game with my son. That was my morning routine. And I would make sure to do that before my phone calls and the work of the day began. At one point, I had gotten so much bleach on my kitchen surfaces, I was afraid to put food on these surfaces anymore. But that morning routine and familiarity it bred really meant something. Because familiarity is one of the things we all rely upon. And the second thing we really sort of pushed people to do was socializing, for all the reasons that we just said. And then we went through their list about what they did. You know, the kid that managed his relationship with his very difficult mom managed that relationship by distance. And what we recommended to him, of course, is let's find ways that you can distance even while in all of this. You know, if you sign up for some sort of additional tutoring, you have to be online for 2 hours to do the stupid additional tutoring. You have to not be with your mom for those 2 hours. If you hate the mom and you don't mind algebra, maybe sign up for a bit of algebra. You're using the same skill, distancing, albeit in a different way. And that's a lot of what we were pitching to people. You know, it's funny, I always start these talks wondering if I'm going to be able to fill up the time. And then I always end these talks thinking, oh crap, I wish I had more time. But look, I have a list. I'm going to tell you all the other things. The other sort of emotional support things that people rely a lot on, and if there's one emotional support thing that we really love, it's planning. Planning is probably the best emotions management skill that there is, right? That to fail to plan is to plan to fail, someone has told us. You can plan for a lot of things, right? I have a long and difficult work day. I can plan to have something pleasant, right? After a long string of phone calls with patients, some of whom might be trying, I can have this as a plan, that I'll discontinue my phone calls at a certain time, and then I have this planned for thing that I'm going to do. That plan, that bit of light at the end of the tunnel helps pull me out of something. I'm about to have an interaction with someone that I really dislike or find hard to be with. I'm going to have a plan for going into that, right? I'm going to have low expectations. I'm going to have an excuse to make it brief. I'm going to drive it towards conversational topics that I find less difficult with that person. I used to have a brother and sister-in-law that would come stay with us in New York City. And between us, I never particularly liked their company. I didn't think they were, you wouldn't have liked their company either, frankly. What I would do is I'd buy them theater tickets every time they came. And they thought I was the greatest guy for buying them theater tickets, you know, Broadway. What I was really doing was buying myself a night without them while they were in New York City. And whatever it cost me for the tickets was well worth it for the evening's reprieve from their company. We know this. For all I know, maybe they know this too, but we knew this. But what that was is it's an example of using planning to try to do something different. And let me, I see I've been talking for a little more than half an hour now. Let me say a few more things, then shut up and we'll take questions. The other emotions management strategies that we recommended, the other big planning thing we recommended to people is, for heaven's sakes, please turn off the damn news. Look, you have an obligation as a citizen to be informed. But when informed becomes sort of wallowing is a line somewhere, isn't it? My experience, the big paper for us in New York is the New York Times. My personal habit has been that I wake up in the morning and I would read the New York Times until the point that I was running into redundant news. So I'd wake up and I'd start reading the news and I think, oh, this qualifies. I thought news meant something I didn't know already. So not something I was reading for the 1000th time. And so I would start reading the news and I would keep reading until I was like, oh, I know this already. And then I'd stop. That process took me about 10 to 15 minutes most mornings. And I would then disallow myself from looking at the news for the rest of the day. It was a very clear observation of ours that people that were having a steady diet of bad COVID news were really depressing themselves. The other was the capacity for delay. That capacity for delay, so lacking in kids with ADD and lacking so much in some adults as well. The good or bad about emotions is that it comes in waves and peaks. The worst of habits is to react to your emotion when it's at its peak, rather than to wait, delay in some way, so as to react when one's in a calmer state. And that capacity for delay, when you feel terrible, just wait a bit. Terrible feelings don't last. We got a lot of mileage out of that. The structure, predictability, a sense of agency and accomplishment. We tried to sell this idea heavy at the beginning of it, and it was more or less a flop, I think. We're big believers in the sense of agency and accomplishment, right? That one of the things that on a day-to-day bolsters my mood is agency and accomplishment. Right, I had this grant proposal and I have it completed and good for me. I had these people to take care of and I took very good care of them, good for me. That's a real bolster to one's sense of purpose and well-being. And we like it so much, and we were trying to sell that idea early on. What we found really is that people just didn't have the bandwidth, that when you're wrestling with ideas of mortality and death and et cetera, the idea of accomplishment was just sort of a goalpost too far to sell them on. And then the last two I'll comment on, and then I'll shut up. Sleep and exercise. All the other ordinary rules exist. If I deprived you of sleep and exercise, it doesn't take that long to start feeling a bit less tethered. And we were big pushers of people to try to maintain some ordinary schedule of sleep and exercise. The closures of the gym and the difficulties leaving one's house early on proved to be a real challenge to try to figure out how to fit exercise in. This has been an extraordinary boon for online classes. A friend has given me an online, what is it? It's not yoga. It's the one where you're in the machine and you pull all the ropes. Come on, somebody knows what this is. What is that? Louise, you're saying it, but I can't hear you.
Pilates.
What?
Pilates.
Pilates, thank you very much. So I have some woman somewhere waiting to give me a Pilates class. From her phone number, she's in California, I think. I must do this. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know how meant for Pilates I am, but I'm going to give it a good try. But that exercise and then sleep. Boy, it's easy to let your sleep cycle fall out of rhythm. I mean, the running joke we have here is that it's Blur's Day, because what's the difference between Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday? And early on, some patients were saying, "Oh, do you mind if I talk to you on Saturday?" And I thought, how would I even know it's Saturday? They're all the same when you don't leave your home. In summary, it is, of course, a terrible time. The terribleness has not been spread even. The terribleness has visited more those people who've been personally affected, been ill, or lost someone. It's had a bigger impact on those people who are first responders, and the smallest but still substantial impact on those of us who are healthy individuals but whose lives have just been greatly disrupted by social distancing. What social distancing has proved true to us is that many of the principles that we always believed to be true about psychology and humans have held up, that we are the people we are, and that how we're experiencing this event is as much determined by our pre-existing character structure as it is by the event itself. And that one's mood is bolstered by a series of things in your life, some of which are almost invisible to you. My kid that joined 20 extracurriculars to get away from his crazy mom, he never sat down and said, aha, I'm going to join 20 extracurriculars. It just felt better when he spent 4 hours at school, post-school, than when he spent 2. A lot of the things we do to manage our emotions are somewhat invisible to us. And it's an aid when they are made clear and when we can undertake them with some intention. And that's what I've been doing for myself and for the people who are good enough to still be my patients by video, is I've been trying to make clear to them what strategies they always have been using and think creatively about how they can use them during COVID. And maybe what strategies exist, but they've never made enough use of. And maybe there's an opportunity here to make more use of it.
Michael, knowing you as well as I do, I know you could talk for another hour and people are dying to ask you questions.
Dude.
So I have a question, but I can ask it to you later. Is there anybody on the panel that would like to unmute themselves and ask you a question, either about New York or about anxiety management or anything? If you think of a question or you'd like to ask one, you can maybe send me a chat question as well, if you prefer me to present it.
Well, and let me ask the group. I've been describing experiences in New York City.
Okay, Jerry. Thank you. Jerry?
Hello, Michael. Can you hear me?
I can perfectly, sir.
Hi, thanks for a fantastic monologue, which was well received. I just wonder, you spoke about kind of the 9/11 period, and also now the togetherness of being in something together where, it's not, I'm trying to understand the terrible thing they're going through. I'm trying to understand what's happening to them and the terrible thing that we're going through.
Yeah.
Is this togetherness, this increase maybe in community or social cohesion, replacing their need to present to a service? Because you indicated referrals had dropped through the floor. And is this what's happening, that people are pulling together and there's a sense, this is helping me?
It's funny that the night that 9/11 happened, I happened to live in an apartment in downtown New York City, and one of the attributes of the apartment is that you could look out the window and see the Twin Towers. Where they previously stood was out my living room window, and I was that close to the events of it all. The 9/11 and COVID have had different experiences in New York City, because both have the benefit of having an external enemy, right? And nothing pulls a group together, I suspect, better than having a shared hatred of somebody. So they're both similar in that way. And the problem with COVID is that the threat itself is so invisible. that there's a bit more suspicion of other people. So your bubble of people is now more clearly defined, right? There's sort of 8 people I see in person, and then the rest of the people I don't see in person. I think what's keeping people from presenting from psychiatric services now is, I don't know how many people call and initiate psychiatric services at the worst of times. The clientele we get, it's more of a planned undertaking for them. It's a commitment. And they see their own lives as in turmoil. I don't know how long I'm going to be here in this physical location. And it's just not the basis from which a lot of our patients initiate treatment. Like, you know, we're not it might be different if it's a hotline thing where people call in. Our community, once more settled, will be much bigger consumers of psychiatric services again. And the biggest service I suspect we're going to get calls for is people who are really, really intimidated about leaving their homes. I think even when it becomes clear that leaving is safe, I think some people have gotten so, I had the pleasure of being interviewed on some TV show based at a local college here, and the kids who set it up are all students at the college, and they were saying how they'd gone back to the campus for some reason, but they were so scared walking around it, that this campus, this place that had all the kind of, you know, previously walking around your college campus referenced accomplishment, hey, I made it here, fun, this is where I hang out with my pals, I guess academics. Now to them, they walked around and it felt like COVID battleground, let's get out of here. And I think a sizable number of the people who were a little inclined to be anxious homebound types before, I think a lot of those people have gotten a lot of practice of being anxious homebound people. And I worry 6 months from now, when we rightfully open up a lot more, I worry that a lot of those people are going to have a lot of trouble getting out of their homes.
Mm. Another question, Michael, from Barry.
Yes.
Thanks, Gary.
Hi, Barry.
Hello, Michael, and Barry O'Donnell from the School of Psychotherapy and Psychotherapy Programs in UCD. Thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting, very engaging account of both your own experience, but also work and life in New York and in the current situation. I think one of the points that really struck me was your, I suppose, conclusion that as you call it, I think the bad life stresses that we're all undergoing, that they're not the cause of, say, psychiatric conditions or psychological disturbance at the level where it's a condition requiring a clinical intervention. And I suppose one of the things that I've been, well, 2 aspects of this. One is what does this tell us about our use of the word anxiety? We're all, okay, we can say we all suffer from anxiety, we all experience anxiety, it's part of the human condition. Not all of us maybe need to go and enter into some kind of work around that. As you say, I think for my sins, follow the work of Sigmund Freud. So I was thinking of his phrase in The Extraordinary Civilization and Its Discontents, where he talks about techniques for the conduct of life, which I think is what you were saying about the kid who stays on doing the extracurricular without thinking it through in those terms, but just that's what he's doing. But what is the distinction between that anxiety that's what we mean by anxiety, as opposed to things that we're worried about, concerned about, distressed about, all these usual things that I suppose it's that question of whether this will inform our use of the word anxiety in terms of what we understand it to be from a clinical point of view, and something that isn't determined by bad things that happen to us from week to week, that it is something more to do with what in our language in the psychoanalytic field we talk about our subjective disposition.
Yeah, I think one of our curses in psychiatry is that we come up with such great terminology for things that it gets taken over by a general culture and its meaning gets diluted, right? Think of all the Freudian terms that are now common parlance, right? The people who tidy up their house are so anal, and someone who has 2 thoughts on their mind is schizophrenic, and my friend's so OCD because they like to show up on time. all of our words lose meaning after a while because people really seem to like them and people really seem to want to talk about these things. I think those amongst us, to have a really good anxiety disorder, you need a constitutional, probably biological, genetic predisposition towards anxiety. And I think we have a tendency to intermingle the word. See, the problem is I feel anxious and an anxiety disorder, we need a new name for them because those two things sound exactly the same. You know, you read, there's so much research done on, you know, psychology undergraduate students must be the best studied population on earth because every damn study is done on them. And what they do is they tell me that this result is applicable to anxiety. And when you read the study, what it is it's a random selection of students. They do something to make them nervous, you know, tell them they're going to get a low grade. And then they measure something. But those are anxious people, not people with anxiety disorders. But that difference, that language is so pedantic as to be lost. But those of us who have people we love and people we've cared for who have anxiety disorders know it's a different kettle of fish. Like my last patient last night has a relational obsessive compulsive disorder where he lives with a constant doubt about the quality of love with the person he's with. He's been with this person forever and ever. There's absolutely no reason to doubt this woman's love for him. And he can never seem to find the satisfaction and certainty that this primary love object is really there for him. That's different than, geez, I'm really nervous, they're going to cancel my favorite TV show. Like those are different units. And I think we need a different language for whatever we want to call anxiety disorders would really help people see that they're of a different category.
Yeah, I mean, there's a phrase that I use, again, from our friend Sigmund Freud, a distinction between the difference in kind, and I think that's what you're talking about, Michael, between, you know, somebody who has an anxiety disorder, as does any of us who on any occasion in any part of any day might be anxious, a difference in kind, and then a difference in degree. And I think I find it a very useful question for me as I'm listening to people. Am I thinking in terms of a difference in kind, or am I thinking in terms of a difference in degree? But I won't go on, but I think what is interesting in terms of your talk and this discussion is, you know, current discussion here about, say, government-funded support for COVID-19 anxiety and mental health issues. I think what you've been saying is very informative for that discussion. So thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Could
Thank
I
you,
ask?
Barry, for yes,
Sorry, Michael. Could I ask maybe Dr. Kieran Clark to have the last question before I wrap up?
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Hey, Karen.
As a fellow New Yorker, I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, over there, what was the kind of employment support for people who were kind of out of work? And was that, here there has been pretty good government support for people whose jobs were on hold, and they haven't lost their jobs yet, though that may change, and there are significant threats in terms of mental health in that regard. And the second question is, sometimes people have, I think there's been a feeling here that in some cases, people have actually benefited from the lockdown in terms of being able to spend more time with loved ones and working from home and seeing kids that they hadn't normally seen for a long time. And there being more, particularly after there was this kind of support, they're being able to work in a more relaxed way. And thirdly, I'm just wondering, when things have opened up there, I think you've opened up to probably a greater degree than we have people appreciated things in a way that you've mentioned that some people have been so anxious that they haven't been able to avail of that? Or have people, on the other hand, noted things, that the benefit of things, are they participating more, or that they hadn't appreciated as much? Thank you.
You're a man after my own heart with a list of questions. The greatest single thing about the social distancing is that I'm at home with my son, who I adore and whom I never get to spend enough time with. And as we all know, you know, one of the terrible things about trying to make a living as a shrink, especially here in New York City, is you're forced to work evenings. And it's the very time I get to spend with my boy is the time I get to spend with someone else's boys. And that's really unfortunate. And I've had more fun and stupidity and more walks in the woods and more bike rides in the last 3 months than I had in the 3 years before. And on a personal note, I've got to figure out a way to make that sustainable, even when the world goes back to normal. Because I just am so in love with it and see it as such a essential thing. Now, as per employment support, you know, New York City continues to be a tale of two cities. We have people with very deep pockets and people who just get by. And their experience during the pandemic has heightened that. You know, a lot of people who made less money don't get I think it's lovely that all the physicians and nurses get all the respect for showing up and caring for people because they deserve it. The guy I think deserves all the credit is the guy that shows up to mop the place. You know, we took some oath about taking care of patients and we get paid more money. The poor guy mopping the joint is getting no great paycheck and is getting all the risk. So those employment supports have been severely lacking in New York City. And people tell me there's some great economic fallout that's going to follow all this. That's beyond my pay grade. And then your last question, if I recall correctly, is will we get a greater sense of appreciation and community now that we're back out again? And I very, very much hope that's the case. The opening here in New York City is in the city, you can eat at restaurants that are outdoors. And in the upstate regions, you can eat at restaurants that are indoors. And you're supposed to have some amount of social distancing in either of those circumstances. Lots of people have told me how great it was to be around people again. But that sense of relief, though, is diluted by an underlying fear of at what risk am I sitting here eating this hamburger? There's a lot to come. But you know, knock wood, let's hope it all goes the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you all guys for your questions, and Michael, thank you very much for a very interesting conversation. I think personally what I took from it is your initial introduction about the fact that many clinicians are actually suffering either personal losses by virtue of the patients they're looking after. Psychiatry is part of that also, and even the patients that aren't coming to see us that we know would benefit by that. And you know, the kind of the lack of familiarity with change, jobs and all the rest of it. So I guess it's about reaching out to each other, but also remembering about how much we can cope with ourselves and, you know, staying grounded. I'd love that we could go on to chat for longer. Luckily, Michael, myself and Blonit and Paul, we're going to a little chat room and, you know, have a cup of tea and chat a little bit more. Whereas all you guys have to go back to the rest of your day. But just before I say goodbye to Michael, I want to thank you all again for coming and spending your Friday lunch hour with us. We're continuing strong right up into September. We have people still wanting to talk after that, and if there's an appetite there, we might extend it beyond the middle of September. The next speaker is Professor Tamsin Ford, and she's going to be talking about priority areas in research during the period of COVID. So hopefully, although it might be slightly narrower in that it's away from the clinical, hopefully there'll still be a huge amount of clinical interest in it. So we'd welcome you all back to that. So Michael, thanks again, and chat to you in a minute, and goodbye to everybody else who joined. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Thank you for everyone coming.